let's talk about some underrated players. Before we get to our list, you have any thoughts on David Walker, the FCS All-American, three-time FCS All-American, I believe, just an unbelievably productive edge rusher from Central Arkansas, somebody who racked up a ton of backfield production. He's just not really built like an NFL guy. Carries about 260, 265 of weight, but he's right around 6'1". He's got shorter arms to him. So you can understand sort of why he was originally an FCS player, but man, it felt like he should have been playing at a lot higher level of competition. I think a lot of loyalty just for staying in the state of Arkansas where he is from makes a lot of sense there. Obviously making a legacy and putting out some great tape against his level of competition. Any thoughts to him on where he could end up being drafted? Do you think he's a fringe day 2 guy? Do you think he can make it into day 2? I think he is. I think he's a day 3 type of a player, but he is a fun one and somebody who I don't love the measurables, but I love the production. I love the motor that he has, and somebody that I would definitely take somewhere on day 3, round 4, round 5. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I need to do the full eval on Walker, but what we saw at the Senior Bowl in practices was relatively impressive. I think you're talking about, every year we get 3 or 4 of these guys from, who are really productive pass rushers at the FCS or the D2 level. And, you talk about, okay, get him in that designated pass rusher role, see where it can go, right? I think about I just mentioned a guy for the Eagles last year from Houston Christian, Jalix Hunt, right? Who by the end of his first season became at least a contributor in that rotation. Look, anybody who can rush the passer, you belong in the NFL, right? Teams are always looking for it. So I'm with you. I think somewhere in that round 4 or 5 range for a team looking to reinforce their pass rush. And for right now, maybe by the end of his rookie season, get him 15 to 20 snaps a game.
Okay, so who are some sleeper edge rushers that you have that you wanted to shout out outside of Walker, who I wanted to make sure I got in?
Okay, so I don't know if I should do this twice, because one of the ones I had written down was Jack Sawyer, because you had him outside of your top 10, and I'm somebody who's very high on him, and yeah.
We've talked about Jack though, so you don't
Okay.
you don't have to necessarily repeat it if you don't want to.
Okay, so I can move to the next one, or you can go first if you want. Either way works.
I'll go first. I'll talk about Kaimon Rucker from UNC. This is somebody who, again, like more of a designated pass rusher type of a player, but somebody who I think is just getting underrated in this class for how productive that he has been. Over the last 2 years, he's played over 1,200 snaps. His nickname is the Butcher, by the way, so absolutely love that. He's a little bit smaller in height. I believe he showed up at, what was it, around 6'1", 255 pounds at the combine, but he's got longer arms than you would expect for a guy who's only 6'1". So he reminds me of Javon Solomon. You remember when Javon Solomon was coming out of Troy? Just a very productive player, that stand-up outside linebacker type of an edge rusher. Where did he go? Where did the Bills draft him? I think it was 4th round.
I think it was in the 4th. We covered him on day 3. I think it was the 4th round.
Yeah. Oh, no, it was a 5th round.
Okay,
so I thought that he was an absolute steal in the 5th round because I thought he should have at the very least been a 4th round pick. But man, he's very productive. He's a very productive dude. 18.7% pass rush win percentage over the last 2 years, 90.6 pass rush grade, 90.4 pass rush grade on true pass sets. He's just a smaller player. Like him being 6'1", he's got longer arms, which you love, but being just 6'1", the stride length's a little bit shorter. So when he's coming in pursuit off the backside, or if he's trying to pursue the linebacker, the ball carrier, he's a little bit slower in that regard. But I think he packs a good punch at contact. I think he's got a wide variety of pass rush moves that he could go to. Day 3 guy, but somebody who, again, if you put him in this designated pass rusher spot as a stand-up outside linebacker, I think he could win for you, and I think he could bring a lot of value as a contributing guy. So Kaimon Rucker, to me, is somebody who is just getting a little bit forgotten about right now. And if it was a less deep edge rush class, he could be in the conversation at the back end of some top 10s for some people, but just because of how deep the class is, I can understand why he's getting pushed a little bit further down. So I felt like Javon Solomon should have got drafted at least a round earlier than what he got drafted at last year. I think the same thing with Rucker. I feel like he should be a early day 3, round 4 type of a pass rusher.
Yeah, people forgot about Rucker this year, mostly because he missed basically the entire first half of the season with an injury, and then he came back. He was really good down the second half, the stretch of the season in the second half, 25 pressures in his last 5 games. And I think you really need to go back to the 2023 tape to get the full brunt of what you get out of Rucker. He had an 89 pass rush grade, 60 pressures. He was one of the best pass rushers in the country. And I remember watching him at North Carolina. The word that comes to me for him is violence. Like, he's pissed off, and he's a guy, anytime that he got a clean shot on a quarterback with a step or two of momentum, I started to cringe a little bit. I was worried about people's health, Trevor, because I'm like, this guy wants to hit people, right? If you're going to be a little bit undersized like this, and I'm about to talk about another guy in a second with this same mentality, but he's somebody to me, that quarterbacks, I'm like, you don't want to take a free shot in the ribs from Kaimon Rucker. I'll tell you that right now. He's very productive. I think he's fallen off boards because, honestly, I think people just forgot about him. I really do. I think with the injuries and then the way North Carolina's season went where they had quarterback issues and didn't contend for anything this year, I think he's a guy who's forgotten about. You're absolutely right. He could be around 4 or 5 steal.
He had a quote when he was coming back from injury. God, I can't remember what the quote was. Oh shoot, I think I found it here. Okay, here we go. Yeah. This is from an article from Tar Heel Times. How much does Kaimon Rucker love football? So much that when he returned from injury that kept him off the field for 4 games, he was just happy to have the pads on. Quote, shoot, I was in uniform, so that was happy for me. The staff was like, be ready to not play a lot. And I said, bro, that's fine. I got my uniform on. I'm happy. Like, the dude just loves football. It was in a situation where he wanted to play. The team was like, all right, yeah, you're cleared, but like, we're gonna ease you into this because it was a lower body injury. He had surgery to miss those 4 or 5 games. And then when he came back, he's like, dude, I'll stand on the sideline in my full pads. I don't care. You can play me for 1 snap. I'm going to put my pads on if you're going to give me the opportunity to put on a uniform. So you love that motor. You love that mentality about him too. And like you said, he plays like that. So, okay, who's your first guy that you're bringing to the table?
Okay, so the next one I have here, in the same mold of pissed off, undersized edge rusher, Trev, I absolutely love Josiah Stewart from Michigan.
You should.
I'll be honest with you. I'll start with the flaws. You're just talking about a guy who's, yes, undersized. Yes, the lack of length comes out a little bit in his tackling. But otherwise, it's just kind of, it is what it is when it comes to that and his build. Because in his game and his actual skill set, I don't think we have a ton of flaws here. I'm being real with you. He's an absolute dog. He's another guy. He's at 100 miles an hour all the time, every single play. And at that size, you have to be, right? But he makes up for it with excellent speed off the edge, right? And I think he knows how compact he is and how he can use that to his advantage, that natural leverage that he has. He's got great closing speed. Again, just like Rucker, loves to hit people, attacks pullers, not afraid of pullers at all. When you talk about, okay, I got a smaller guy, I got a 310-pound guard running at him, what's going to happen? He does not care at all. This is somebody... Look, he's going to have a specialized role. He's probably going to be a designated pass rusher. It's going to be hard for him to play the run every single snap. You're not going to see him as a featured guy playing 70 snaps a game either. But I think you're talking about somebody in Josiah Stewart. To me, I think in the 3rd round, if you need help off the edge, even again if you're Atlanta and you're going other spots early, if you need a center for whatever reason, on day 2 to replace Dalton, if you're going corner early, I think Josiah Stewart's a guy that teams are going to absolutely love. 2nd in the nation this year in pass rush win rate, 27.7%. 3rd in pass rush grade at 92.3. And even for his size and playing at Michigan, obviously life is easy with Graham and Grant on the inside, but 83.7 run defense grade. I think Josiah Stewart profiles as somebody who could really help a team's defensive line, to me, likely in the 3rd round.
You see him right there, number 69 overall on the PFF big board that we have there. That is in my opinion, 3rd round pick. Like this, size be damned. This is the type of football player that you want on your team. This is a Nick Bonito type of a player, right? And I think everybody shouts out the Nick Bonito role, but that's because that's been the most successful. I could see Josiah Stewart getting that sort of playing time as that designated pass rusher type of a stand-up outside linebacker player. He increases the team speed that you have, and the output that he had over the last couple of years has been absolutely fantastic. I'll shout out Quandarrius Robinson from Alabama. This is somebody who, not often do you get a player from Alabama that's considered a sleeper, but because of sort of his journey, he was on the team. He was a former 4-star recruit and outside linebacker, so he was a highly regarded recruit, but he was sitting behind Will Anderson and Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell for most of his career while he was at Alabama. You see him right there. He's ranked 106th on the PFF big board. I think he should be, just because of lack of production overall, I don't think that he is going to make it into the day 2 conversation. I think he'll be probably a priority day 3 pick type of a guy because redshirted his first year in 2020, played on special teams basically as a reserve guy in 2021, 2022, and 2023, even though he was active for all of those years. He missed a lot of time this past season while he was allowed to be a full-time starter. I should say he earned the job as a full-time starter. That's a better way to say it. He suffered an elbow and a forearm injury that forced him to miss a good chunk of games this season. But while he was out there, 341 snaps for him, 19% pass rush win percentage. That's 93rd percentile. dude knew how to get after the pass rusher. And the thing is, man, we've talked about a couple of guys on this show that, hey, if you fix their lower body mechanics, if you fix their footwork a little bit, Robinson is one of those guys where I would watch him as a stand-up rusher, and I'd be like, okay, this is clearly a pass rush play. It looks like he's pinning his ears back. He's getting after the quarterback, and that's what he would do. But his feet weren't pointed to the target correctly. They weren't pointed to the backfield correctly. He would launch off the back foot instead of loading off of that front foot to give him even more of an advantage. But man, this dude knows how to get off the ball. He's got long arms to him, which make him tough for offensive tackles to handle. And I just think that there's a lot of potential to what he could bring as a stand-up outside linebacker, given some of that length. You talk about a couple of these guys and playing that outside linebacker pass rush position, but also having that length to be able to wrap guys up and tackling and defend the run and shuffle along the line of scrimmage, defend options and outside zone and things like that. So Quandarrius Robinson, he's going to take a little bit of a development. He's not going to be some guy that I think is going to be able to step in right away and just be dominant at the NFL level. But second half of his rookie contract, you might have something here with this player. So again, we don't get a lot of Alabama players that are thought of as sleepers, especially guys that were four-star recruits, guys who were very highly recruited. He was a top 80 recruit in the country. He just stuck around at Alabama, sort of waited for his playing time to manifest. It did this past year, but then he got hurt. So a lot of reasons why he hasn't been able to break out yet and why his game at the NFL level could be even better than what we saw in college. So very high pass rush win rate, as you see, 24.1%. I mean, that's nuts. So Quandarrius Robinson from Alabama is somebody else who I think should be getting some more love.
Yeah, I think you're talking about a guy with an extremely small sample size, right? And somebody who is extremely raw. He's deep in the bucket of athlete who you take a chance on because you just have to add so much polish to it. But I think the potential, like you mentioned, that's the word for it. It's certainly there. I think you look at his ability. You mentioned to use that length. I really like actually in the run game how he does it, how he stacks and sheds off of the edge. You can see the pass rush potential in a very small sample. So I think he's going to be a day 3 pick because there's so little production and he's played so little defense. And I think actually all that experience as a special teamer is going to help him make and stay on a roster. Right? When you think about, okay, it's a day 3 guy, special teamer with potential, with pass rush potential. I think certainly, I don't know if he'll go as high as you have him on the board there in the low hundreds, just because of the lack of production and really just, again, the lack of the volume of tape, right? I think he rushed the passer only, was it 130 something times this year? It really wasn't much at all. And there was times where he was kind of a tweener playing a little bit of linebacker too, especially earlier in his career. So I think you take him as a raw athlete with a little bit that you've seen on tape and see if you can get more out of him. And if nothing else, taking him on day 3 and you get a high floor special teamer, I don't see anything wrong with that when you're building a roster.
Beach in the chat saying my sleeper is Oluwafemi Oladejo, the outside linebacker edge rusher from UCLA, who I thought had a fantastic Senior Bowl and really showcased what he could do as a pass rusher, somebody who played a lot of off-ball linebacker. They moved him over to edge, losing the Murphy twins, losing Latu. They really needed him on that presence in that spot. And his presence on the ball as an edge rusher this past year. And he showcased, man, hey, I got fast hands, I got violent hands, I got long arms to me. I can play a little edge rusher at the NFL level. So I like that shout out. I think he's still an early day 3 pick, but I do like that shout out there for him. Who's your next guy you're bringing?
All right, a guy I've loved watching the last 2 years. He was a transfer from Miami to SMU, played a huge part, obviously, in their playoff, making the playoff this year. Elijah Roberts, big 285-pound edge rusher. More pressures than any other edge defender in college football over the last 2 years. 131 pressures, 22% pass rush win rate. I believe do I have it as the 8th best in college football over the last 2 years? The 12th best pass rush win rate in college football. This is just a big, powerful player who can handle responsibilities off the edge. If you want him to reduce inside, especially on rundowns, he can do that. I think he's somebody who, he may not put up those types of pass rush totals in the NFL because he's not the most explosive speed rusher. He wins a lot more with power. Again, 285 pounds, certainly big enough to play the run off the edge and to rush with power, but just such a consistent player week in and week out the last couple of years at SMU. Somebody I've just loved watching. I really believe he could be a late day 2 or early day 3 pick and be a valuable piece of almost any defense, because if you're talking about He stood up a lot. He could play outside linebacker. He could reduce inside and take on tackles, head up. I think he could play even in a 4-3 at his size, especially on early downs with the way he plays the run. To me, he's a well-rounded football player, not as twitchy an athlete as some of the guys ahead of him, but somebody who could be really productive in multiple roles.
I have him listed as a 3-4 defensive end, so to play a lot in that 4-eye role, and I think he'd be fantastic for it because I think he could defend the run really well. I think he's a very strong football player. Showed that at the Shrine Bowl. I got to see that in person. Love what I saw from him there, and just the overall blend of, I think, power and speed. Now, it's not the speed and the flexibility, it's not like rare. It's not why we're talking about him as, that like an early day 2 type of player. But man, I think that you could play him as a 4-3 defensive end. I think he has a 5 technique. I think you can play him as a 3-4 defensive end, a little bit more inside as a 4-eye. You can line him up as a stand-up if you want, but I do think he's a fantastic football player. 81st overall on my big board. I think he should be a 3rd-round pick. I think he's a really talented player who's graded out very well, as you guys saw on the screen, in elite grades over the last 2 seasons. My last guy that I'm bringing to the table, Ahmed Hassanein, the defensive end from Boise State, somebody that really burst onto the scene with a great year this past year, 81.4 overall grade, played very well against Penn State in that college football playoff game, and he's got a great background story to him. He actually grew up over in Egypt, didn't grow up playing football, actually grew up participating in CrossFit. So he was this weightlifter, incredible athlete, this big, giant athlete type of a dude. And his brother, who was living over in America, was like, hey, come over here and play football. And so he ends up coming over during high school and gets to play some high school football, gets to Boise State. And we're thankful for that because I think he's a hell of a football player. He's another guy that I got to watch at the Shrine Bowl. And he was impressive to me. He was consistently somebody who was able to hold the line of scrimmage. He is built the way that you want a 4-3 defensive end to be built. 6'2", 32 and a 1/4 inch arms. Okay, the height and the length are why we're not talking about this guy a little bit higher as a 3rd-round pick, something like that on day 2. But he's got good size to him, right around 265, 270 pounds. He's got that strength, obviously, with the CrossFit background to him, and I feel like he's got a knack for getting into the backfield as well. So I don't think this is going to be again, you draft him and you're starting him right away. But if you are a 4-3 even front, he is somebody who I think you could draft and feel great about having in a rotational role early on in his rookie contract with the ability to develop into more. I love how he approaches the game. I love the motor that he plays with. I love the strength. And even with him, okay, maybe he lacks a little bit of length, but he also lacks a little bit of height too, which can actually be an advantage because I think he plays with pretty good leverage, which only helps his strength profile shine a little bit more. So he is somebody who, he's not a flashy player. And I think we often talk about these day 3 gems, day 3 sleepers. We always gravitate towards some of the flashy players that could break out, but he's somebody who I just think where his floor is, the height of his floor isn't getting talked about enough of the type of NFL player that he could be. So I like Ahmed Hassanein. He's my dude.
No, yeah, consistent generator of pressure. And you mentioned the CrossFit background. I believe there's also backgrounds in wrestling and boxing, right? Obviously all those combat sport techniques that get talked about for edge rushers, especially, right? That one-on-one, hand-to-hand combat, and he's really good with that. So he's been an ascending player for Boise State the last couple of years and became their best pass rusher, obviously, this past year. Another team that made a playoff run, had a fantastic season. And obviously, Ashton Jeanty was talked about the most from that team, but there were plenty of other contributors, and Hassanein was certainly one of them.
Last dude we'll talk about, just because I see the chat talking about him, is Jared Ivey, the other defensive lineman from Ole Miss. Like Elijah Roberts, I have Jared Ivey listed as a 3-4 defensive end because I just love the size, the strength, the length that he plays with. He played defensive end for Ole Miss. I don't think he has the first step explosiveness and the overall speed up the arc to consistently threaten the outside shoulders as a true 4-3 defensive end to be. I mean, he can be used there. Like, if an even front team drafts Jared Ivey and plays him there, I don't think he'll be bad. I think he'll be fine. I just don't really think that he'll give you the pass rush chops that you're looking for at that spot. Whereas instead, if you're more of an odd front team and you get to reduce him inside a little bit more, he can play anything from a 3 technique all the way out to a 5 technique. That versatility, I think, is going to be his biggest strength at the NFL level. So I've got him, where is this, 57th? I think I've got him 57th on my big board. So he's just cracking my top 60. He is my top 3-4 defensive end. And I just love the overall strength and leg combinations that he's able to bring.
Yeah, I was watching him and a name popped into my head, and I had to go into the inner workings of our draft guide here because it ended up not being an original comp. Someone either, I don't know if it was you or someone in the scouting staff, but the John Franklin Myers comp that somebody put down.
That was me because he reminds me a lot of Franklin Myers for that reason.
It's the same. When I got done watching Ivy's tape, I was like, that's it, isn't it? He's built roughly the same way. He's versatile like that, and I think the advantage to having a guy like that, and you've seen Franklin Myers have a ton of success with the Jets, obviously now with Denver, is we're talking about a lot of guys today who are scheme specific and they need to be in such and such defense. I don't think that's the case with Ivy. I think the experience even on the outside as a stand-up guy, especially this past year for Ole Miss, where you look at his numbers, almost identical to Princely Umanmielen. That's why they're so close on the board, and they were both fantastic for him all season. I think he's somebody that you just throw in that category of defensive lineman, and whatever defense he's getting into, you figure it out later, right? Because I think that's a valuable role. And it's something I really like that he talked about at the Combine. Somebody asked him, okay, what is it about the versatility, right? That is a big tool for you. And he talks about, understanding my role wherever I'm lined up, understanding even the shell of the defense behind me and being aware of that, knowing what I need to do and how to beat blocks. I think Ivy, I've been saying this for a few weeks now, especially after I heard that at the Combine. I think coaches are going to really like him. I think the fact that he is adaptable makes him, it gives him a greater variety of options, right? When you talk about, 57 on the board, I don't think it's a specific team looking for him. I think it's just any team that wants a solid, versatile defensive lineman, he could fit in almost anywhere.